Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 67.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm here today with my colleague, Dr. Mike Gibson, and we're talking about your own healthy lifestyle. One of the huge challenges of an entrepreneur is how to implement all the action steps that you're telling your patients to implement. And of course, integrity is one of the most important qualities that you can have as a healthcare provider, as a leader, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. So we talked today about some of the challenges that we faced and still face and how we overcome those on a regular basis in order to keep moving forward and accomplishing that vision that we've set out. Enjoy today's episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic. Mike, welcome back to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be here.
Always great to have you on the show. And today's topic in particular is something that you and I have had thousands of conversations about, anytime we chit chat about what's going on. And I remember all the conversations as we're sitting up at your cottage on the patio about, especially in the early days, developing Life by Design and talking about our lifestyles and what we were doing. And we were really developing the whole strategy side of Life by Design as we talked about the different requirements. So one of the common things that I'll get in terms of questions or feedback from people listening to the show is, you're busy, you've painted this big vision for us and we're starting to incorporate that, and which is wonderful, but how do you maintain a healthy lifestyle for yourself? And, how do you overcome the challenges of being a busy entrepreneur? So, I'll throw it back to you, Mike. Been doing this a long, long time. What do you see as some of the early challenges and some of the challenges your clients talk to you about with being an entrepreneur and living a healthy lifestyle?
Well, I think it just comes down to our focus and our drive to create these businesses and these practices that we desire and that we want, and all our focus goes there, and it becomes so easy to forget about our own health and to forget about the things that we need to do to really to drive that, to be almost like a high performance machine that's necessary to really put in the time and effort and really perform at a high level as far as being a chiropractor, so that we can reach those goals. And it becomes very easy to kind of sit down, get working away, and before you know, the day is gone and another day has passed, and you've forgotten that there are a lot of requirements that your body has. You're no different than say one of your patients. There are things that you need to do to be able to perform at your best and ultimately meet your goals as a chiropractor.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to become consumed by this. I think back to 2006, 7, 8, in the early days of pre-Life by Design and then early into Life by Design, you're starting to get into a busier practice and taking on Life by Design. I do remember, the massive influx in emails that were in my inbox. And, I think it's funny. I think back to that time and how it used to be a badge of honor that I'd spend all day going through emails and how busy we were. And then, now here we are 10 years later. And, the one thing I wish I didn't have to do was have 40 emails that I needed to reply to and write content for and what have you. So it is easy to become totally consumed. I'm sure the same for you, but I've gone through, ups and downs and my own struggles in terms of implementation. I would say for me personally, the biggest challenge in implementation is the training side of it, which is funny considering, this is our third training facility and it literally is, 10 steps from my office door for me to walk over and train anytime that I want. You'd think that would, really lend itself towards training 5-6 days a week, but it does become so consuming doing other things that it's just so easy not to go over there. Of all the different areas, up to this point, what would you say has been the biggest challenge for you in terms of your implementation in any of the areas?
I was really fortunate. My mom was a nutritionist, so food has always been, from a very young age, something that I was very aware of and took a lot of time to learn about. And so, as I always say with the food portion of it, it's something that is a process. Like when I'm talking to patients who are just starting to implement Eat by Design, it's like, listen, as you and I were chatting about before we started recording, it's it's been 16 years since I've been eating by design. Now, it hasn't always been called by design, but for the most part, I've been eating that way for 16 years, I figure. And, for the first 10 or so years, it was kind of up and down and up and down. Still, I ate very, very well, but as far as like eating 100% by design, it was certainly up and down. It's really only the last 6 or so that I've been, 99% of the way there. And so it's a process, right? It takes time. And, I was thinking also is that, part of our, chiropractic productivity system, I'll have to put a link there so people can check that out. But the, a big part of that process in helping people strategize to implement these new little lifestyle hacks that, that they think are important to help them reach their goals is that, these habits are, this little app essentially is going to help you, remind you to do certain things. But when they become a habit, then the app is no longer needed, or at least those particular habits that you're trying to create are no longer, you don't need to add those to the app because, they've become a habit, which is kind of ironic in some ways. But, I think that's really what it is that, for me, I've done a lot of these things for so long. I played a high level hockey, so training was required since I was really young. So being part of the gym has always been kind of part of my thing. But there were certainly times that I can think back as far as just some life occurrences. I know my sister and that whole experience for 3, 4, 5 years. I know I can think back and I at times there I weighed about 30 pounds. No, 30. 20 pounds less than I do now, simply just because it was a very stressful time, and training wasn't a priority to me, and I'm sure my eating wasn't nearly as good back then either. So I think that's probably true of everyone. Is certain life occurrences come your way, and certain things get kind of pushed aside, and it's not always business. It can be family related or relationships or who knows what else is going on. But I think that the thing that if you want to say what have I struggled with, I don't know if it's a struggle, but the thing I haven't necessarily made to be as important, or I didn't realize the importance is probably sleep. And I don't think I recognized how important it was over the years until the last few, where I've really prioritized it and made sure that my sleep is nothing gets in the way of my sleep.
That's pretty funny. I mean, it's one of those things now with the kids getting a little bit older for you, it's actually possible to prioritize it. I think of, some of our entrepreneurs and business owners with young kids like myself. Our kids are 3 and 1. So, when I say sleep's a priority, it can be a priority, but obviously, the priority is our kids. So it gets difficult to overcome that. So let's just say I'm looking forward to sleep becoming a priority and being able to shut her down at 9 o'clock if I want to, so I can get up nice and early. But we'll get to sleep. We'll get to some of the strategies here, and we'll share with you some of our personal tips and tactics. But I think the overarching theme here, and this is really what it comes down to, we're chatting about the struggles and the challenges, and there's many of them. We didn't even really talk about physical adjusting. We were mentioning in the pre-show, when your volume starts to increase, just the physical nature on your body. I know last week my associates were away, so I was doing every single checkup and examination and visit and so on. And, my elbows this week, it's amazing how sore my elbows are. We do a lot of toggle recoil. So, there's lots of stress and strain that are going through those. But, it's one of those things where you're stepping up in front of people in your community and your practice. And I think this is the thing that's always resonated with me most. It's the thing that gets me most excited for chiropractors in their businesses. And that's the concept of live it to lead it. It's annoying / frustrating / I can't believe when I see chiropractors, not living it. And of course we talked a bit about our own struggles, but how can you stand in front of somebody and, make this case that this is how they're supposed to live? These are the action steps that they're supposed to take when you yourself are not actually doing them. It's just, I don't know about you, Mike, but it's one of the things that really, really frustrates me more than anything in coaching and working with other clients. Yeah,
and it could be as simple. I mean, for some chiropractors who don't have, in air quotes, a lifestyle type practice where they're giving other advice. It could be as simple as, are you getting adjusted at the same frequency that you're recommending? And I know for a lot of docs that they're not. But of course, if you have a practice like we do, where you're giving, advice about food and training and mindset, then you better be doing those things. And I think that's where integrity comes in. And like you said, live it to lead it, in terms of, listen, I'm recommending you do these things, and you better believe that I'm doing the same things.
Right.
And I think it's a big part, even, when we're chatting about marketing, and becoming that authority in your community, that leader in your community, where people are looking to you, not only because you know what to do, but because you're doing it. And I think that's what a big part of being a leader is. It's not just being able to talk a good game, but it's being able to make sure that your actions are lined up with what you're recommending, and that people are. I can't tell you how many times I've done an Eat by Design seminar, and people are like, well, and this actually was something that kind of held people back in the beginning, as they looked at me and said, well, there's no way I can do what he does. Mm-hmm. And, that was eye-opening to me when different people repeatedly said that to me. I had to kind of figure out how I could, be more open about my struggles around it, because they saw that, or they thought that, this was so easy for me and I was so perfect at it, which was the farthest thing from the truth. But it really made me realize that, as part of being a leader and guiding them in this lifestyle process, that I needed to be a little bit more open about some of the struggles, and so that they could relate better. But there was good and bad in that, I think, because they saw me as this leader and someone who they could, look to and want to emulate. And so I think that's a great part of when it comes to marketing yourself, and especially in today's marketplace, where you want to be that authority in your community. People are looking to you for health advice, period. Or if you're just if you're just having a straight chiropractic practice, that's great. But there's someone that you're someone that they are looking to as someone who they can model.
Yeah, I think that, if you're listening and you think, oh, well, I'm not, at that gold standard currently, and that's okay too, because as you said, I think there's a lot of value in sharing with people your own struggles, right? There's a lot of value, and same thing when you bring on staff. This is a conversation I have a lot with staff or new doctors. If they're new to Life by Design, or they're new to Eat by Design, or new to any of the components, it's a great opportunity to really pay attention to what your challenges and struggles are. So, when people come to the front desk, they'll often ask, the staff, so, do you actually do this? Is this what you do as well? And my staff knows that they can share with them, not 100%, but it's something I'm working towards as well. And, here's the parts that I had a hard time with. This is how I overcame them. So there's a lot of value, as Mike alluded to, in sharing your own challenges and struggles. And that's what we're doing here today on the episode. I want to walk you through each of the different Life by Design components: Think by Design, Eat by Design, Move by Design. Now, again, there's not really much to say about Power by Design other than, you should be getting checked and corrected as necessary. I think, although the caveat here, Mike, is not only getting checked and corrected, but you should be having your own examinations. And that's something that, we have scheduled into our reminder system, as every 6 months, all the doctors go through the examination process, just like I do with other type of tests that I have as a big part of my physical well-being. I get blood work done every 6 months. So, again, that's back to the live it to lead it. You're telling people, okay, you need to have tests done for me to determine what needs to happen or where we're at in the process. So I think the same thing can be said for yourself. But, where this all starts, it starts with Think by Design. And, I'll put in the show notes a link to the chiropractic productivity system. It really is a fundamental central component to this. So Mike, walk us through the important components of Think by Design and why this is the starting point as you start to figure out your own lifestyle as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think we've certainly recognized over time, anytime that we've created new projects for anything in Life by Design, whether it's creating lifestyle type advice or just content for people, or it's even just creating your practice and your business and becoming a good entrepreneur. It's that everything always comes back to Think by Design and going through this process to really, in the end, create the perfect action plan, for you to follow in order to reach these goals. So, there are 5 steps to the Think by Design process. There's identifying your core philosophy, really understanding what it is that you believe about different things in your life. There's identifying a clear vision. So when it comes to your health, as an example, it's really getting clear about what your goals are for your health. What's that vision? How do you look? How do you feel? How do you perform when you're as healthy as you want to be? It's as part of that is really understanding why that's important to you. So is it something that, what is the motivating factor? What's the fuel that's going to, get you to get up early in the morning and meditate or head to train? Like, what is it why do you want to do this? And then, of course, last of all, based on all that information, what steps are you going to need to take to make this a reality? And so this is exactly what's necessary in this case when it comes to your own health, is that you've got to really go through and ask yourself these questions. And of course, we recommend in the productivity system that you go through this for all areas of your life, including your practice. And we've got a little bit more of an involved process for that. But when it comes to your health, it's no different. These are the steps that you need to take in order to create the perfect action plan and come up with the perfect strategies, or the best strategies you know of, in order to, again, make this vision for your health a reality.
Yeah, I think that becomes one of the things people want. But it's so funny, right? 'Cause it's the same in every instance, whether it's health or whether it's, learning the marketing side of it, or you're learning your A to Z, process, communication. People just want the end result.
Yeah.
And, it's so funny. Yeah, do this. And even maybe more so, they just want the result. They want the strategies. And here, let's skip all that part. You just tell me what I'm supposed to do, which, can only take you so far if you don't understand, the why behind the what, and the inner workings of, why you're doing certain things. And obviously, from an entrepreneurial side, there's some of these projects just require a much more in-depth knowledge base. But it is funny in practice how there's so much of a relationship between, what our practice members are going through and what we go through. And, we think that we've, evolved to the point where we're not, experiencing the same challenge and struggles. But when you think about it, we really are. And if you can tune into that, I think there's a lot of really good value, because I think you can start to have these conversations with people and open yourself up and be vulnerable and share with them your experiences. So one of the things that, we do and Think by Design that's been extremely valuable, and I just came off a weekend, so got a chance to experience this, is really breaking it down into, segments for your life, and whether it's a prep day or a practice day or personal time, and then within that starting to time block out some of the most important things. So, I know for me, training specifically being the challenge, it's I know that I need to train. I know that it's a requirement to move, and I know that training is a great strategy. I just don't do it because I love to do it. And I think, for a lot of you guys listening in, there's so many components, whether it's business or health, that are requirements. You need to do them, but you're not necessarily doing them because you love to do them. You're doing them because you need to. And if you're going to follow that, which you should, it's not just as simple as, I love to train, so I'm going to go do it. You're going to need to time block these things out. So, Mike, I know for you, you're big on this, especially with training, because I'll try and contact you sometimes when you're at the gym, and, you'll always tell me, well, I'm at the gym. I actually now know what time you're at the gym, so I try to not contact you, but that's obviously been a big tactic for you that's gone a long way to keeping you consistent.
Yeah, and I'll share kind of my gym story, and it's not one that I recommend, but I think it'll offer some insight to some important little strategies, I'll call them, in order to really help people as far as keeping on track with their training. But before I do, I think I was having a talk with one of my clients. It was last week, and essentially the gist of it was this doc was feeling guilty, whether they realized it or not. I could tell they felt really guilty that they were not working more, or they were taking some time off, and that's why time blocking is so important, right? And I know this is totally true of me, is that you always have more projects. I hadn't reached my goals yet as far as practice was, so I felt like I always needed to work, and then if I ever took time off, I felt guilty about it, because I had this I should be working, and that's just part of who I am, and what was who I was growing up, and kind of this essentially the characteristics that were kind of built into me as a child by my parents. It's just, work ethic is super, super important. And so I just, I felt guilty when I would take time off because I thought, hey, I should be doing all these other things that are on my list that I need to get done to reach my goals. And this client was saying the same thing. I could hear it in their voice. It was like they were telling me about, I think I just asked them about, what they were going to do for the long weekend. And I could just tell in their voice they felt really guilty about it because they thought they should be, working and doing some of the things, working on some of the projects that, we were talking about. And it's like, listen, it's okay to take time off. In fact, I can't tell you how healthy it is and how much more productive you'll be is if you actually plan that time off and plan not to do any work so that there's absolutely no guilt. Now, of course, on the flip side of that, you need to plan significant time and work your butt off on the times of the week that you actually do schedule work time in. You've got to earn that time off, but you should absolutely schedule time every single week to have some free time, have some family time, some personal time, just to live life and do other things. And at the time when I think when you use time blocking, that because you've planned it that way, I think that feeling of guilt tends to go away because this is what you're supposed to be doing during this time, and as part of your plan to accomplish your entrepreneurial goals, this free time was something that you planned into it. And so I think the time blocking is so important for so many reasons, but I think as far as just doing a good job at planning free time for yourself, you can really enjoy it. And I think that's super, super healthy. I promise to come back to the training part. And again, do not do this at home. But, the best thing ever for me, as far as my training goes, was opening a gym. I'm like you. I don't hate, but it's close to hate. I don't like training. I've never liked training. I did it a lot. I've done a lot my whole life, because I played hockey, and it was something that was a necessity for me to reach my goals. And then since then, it's just that intellectually I know that I need to, part of my goals are to live a long, healthy life where I can do what I want and have nothing holding me back physically. And so I know that training is a big part of making sure that I reach that goal. But I am not there, with a big smile and sense that I enjoy it. I have no goals of, competing in any CrossFit games. That is the farthest thing from my list of goals and objectives for my life. I go to the gym because I know I need to as a human being. It's just it's something I have to do. That's why I go. But for me, to be honest, the thing that's made it, and there's two parts to it, but the biggest part of it is that we have open gym at our CrossFit gym. And so what I did is I scheduled time in the members schedule for open gym, and I scheduled an hour there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so I am required to show up and open the door for people to unlock it. And if I don't show up, then people are pissed. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I was away. And I totally forgot to get someone to cover for me, and I got all these nasty emails. Where the hell were you? But it's good, right? Because I have to show up. I have to show up for those hours because people are relying on me. So that's been the best thing. And again, I'm not recommending you do this. There are better ways and easier ways to hold yourself accountable to going to the gym. But for me, that's been the biggest thing. And then the second part of that is that I have a training partner that is also there all of those days, and so that accountability to him to show up together, to train together, is something that is certainly very, very powerful as far as accountability goes.
I think the lesson here, from Mike's example, is to understand yourself, know your nature, and in Mike's nature not being one who wants to necessarily go and train as, one of his most enjoyable things on this planet. He's customized his schedule. He's customized the process to at least, groove the path a little bit for him to make it easier, meaning he's got to be there to open the door. He's got a training partner. So you can take that same thought and you can apply it to these other areas. So I think about, Think by Design as an example, and there's so much to do in Think by Design. So whether it is reviewing your goals, whether it's going over the different steps for yourself, reviewing your day, having some type of ritualized system, again, in order to do that. I know for me, it's, I wake up at 4 o'clock, 5 out of 7 days. And so I get up, I go to the washroom, I take my supplements, I pack my lunch, I go out the door. And so I don't do any type of, say, Think by Design stuff until I get into the office. Now, Mike, you've always been solid at this, and it's always been a big part of your routine. What currently is the morning routine for you?
Yeah, I mean, it changes and it evolves constantly, and based on my goals, and like you said, what other what other things are going on in my life. And certainly when the kids were younger, it was very different than it is now, where they were actually, my kids seem to be getting up earlier now than they used to. But for me, getting up in the morning, mobility, ever since I turned 40, I can tell you, I'm feeling it physically, and I just mobility has become even more priority. Like I'm always at the gym. I'm playing hockey. I'm very, very active, and so mobility was something I always built into what I was doing. It was kind of like my pre-hockey routine. It was pre-going to the gym routine. It was during training. So for a long time, I kind of cut that out of my morning routine, but I've added it back in recently because I've just been feeling kind of, a little crickety when I wake up in the morning, a little stiff. So, I think that's a good point there, is that it's going to change, right? It's not something that it's going to evolve. You're going to find better strategies. You're going to have different things that are more important to you at different times. But for me right now, getting up and going through my joint-to-joint mobility especially is something that's become a high priority for me again. I've been on and off again for so many years of meditation. I'm terrible at it, and I keep working at it, and so I definitely go through times where I'm working away at it, and then times where I'm like, screw this, I can't do this, and my mind just goes a million miles a minute. So right now, I can tell you, there's no meditation going on in the morning. I'm at a frustrated with my lack of ability to meditate again. Reading has always been a big part of my morning routine. I love to learn, and I love starting my day that way. Just getting some reading, and even if it's 20 minutes, it's half an hour at the most usually. But just starting the day like that, just kind of feeding my brain with something is always kind of probably been the consistent thing with my early morning routine, is just getting up and learning something every morning. And that's really the gist of it. And of course, then going into my productivity system is the next piece of it before I start work, and really looking through my system and seeing what's most important that day, getting out my my daily focus, and actually writing down on paper what I'm going to do for all the different hours of the day, and making sure that I have a solid plan, and then it's getting to work.
Yeah, I think there's lots of great things in there, and obviously you've evolved to incorporate those. I think the big one for me, is same for you, is, partitioning your day. So knowing through that daily focus sheet that we use in the chiropractic productivity system, from 6 to 6:30, I'm going to work on this project from 6 and so on and so forth. And that really helps you leverage the time that you have in the day, because again, this is part of the episode today, is time is at an essence. So making sure you know exactly what you're doing. When it comes to Eat by Design, we've chatted a bit about, number one, just recognizing it's a process. The big thing for me is, being in tune with what my goals are at any given time. So yes, there's lots of action steps you can take. We've talked about on Eat by Design type episodes before, especially on the main Life by Design podcast, Sunday meal prep, planning your meals. But from a strategic standpoint, for me, the big one is just knowing what I'm trying to accomplish. And it just fits the same as it does with any other business activity, is when you know what the end is supposed to be, it's much easier to carry out the action steps. So, I went through a phase in the last 8 months where it was a weight loss phase, and now I'm in a muscle development phase. So, your diet slightly changes and is tweaked, and just having a clear idea of what that is at any given time allows me to make sure that I'm following through those action steps. So, other than the process, Mike, any other tips or strategies that you find valuable in the Eat by Design?
Well, I just want to reiterate this because you just said it again, and I mentioned it earlier. I think this is probably the big takeaway I would like people to take from this episode, is that you really need to go back to this Think by Design process. That's what this is all about, and that's going to be your, the biggest, fastest route to success in anything in life, and certainly when it comes to this and your own health, is just, what do you believe? What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish it? And what steps are going to be best? What strategies are going to help you get there the fastest? And not just doing that once, but doing that, we always recommend on a quarterly basis. And as you mentioned, is a perfect example as far as your different goals as far as Eat by Design goes, that's exactly why, your goals and objectives are going to change. And so therefore your actions are going to need to change. But it just goes back to that. I mean, all these things that we're mentioning we're not suggesting that these need to be part of your plan. We're not that at all, just kind of hoping that these examples will give you ideas about things and maybe help you overcome some hurdles that you may be having when it comes to your own health and what you should be doing. But more importantly, is that you have to identify for yourself, again, what do you believe? What are you trying to create? Why are you trying to create it? So that the action steps are, they match up. They're going to help you to meet those goals. But without going through that process and just adding these little strategies that we're bringing up, that's not going to really help. You've got to figure out all the other stuff first. Not just do this. It's go through all those steps, go through the process, figure it out, so that you make sure that your strategies are the right ones.
Yeah, I would agree. That's the essence of today's episode, guys. So if you haven't done that, at least check out the chiropractic productivity system. All of that is built into it, and there's a step-by-step process to lead you through this and get you into the habit of implementing, the action steps that you come up with. I know we've chatted about Move by Design at length. We've talked about sleep and the importance of having some type of restoration routine. I think, I'll leave you with this. Once you get down to the strategy component, what I find valuable for me in the development of habits is just triggers, and it's almost like when you flip a switch, it initiates 5 or 6 other steps. And that's valuable because, in your day, there are all kinds of, individual actions. And if you're trying to create habits around those, then it starts to become a lot. Whereas I like to group the different steps together. So let's say a morning routine, or a workout routine, or a restoration routine. So you can have 5 or 6 or even 10 steps within that routine. But once I start the routine, I'm going to carry out those 10 steps. Or once I start the workout routine or the morning routine and so on. So don't think that, you have to get overwhelmed with all these habits and you've got this massive long list. You can group them into action steps. You can figure out what the best and easiest triggers are for you. You can make sure you time block this out. So, there's a set period where you're going to flip that switch and carry that process out. And then among all of this, the whole point is it's going to leave you lots of carved out time to fulfill the action steps, to get through your projects that are all leading you towards whatever this goal, whatever the big vision is that you've set out for yourself. So go to the show notes, guys, at lifebydesignforchiropractors.com, and I'll put the notes from today in there, /podcast, and find today's episode. I'll go ahead and put the link to the chiropractic productivity system so you can check that out. And as always, thank you so much for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.